Good evening and a very warm welcome to today's webinar on Reality Check on India's Search. Thank you for taking time out and being here today. I am Nisha Yadav, and on the behalf of Social Curate team, I would like to thank all the guests present, speakers, attendees for gracing their presence. Team Social Curate is a non-governmental organization working on the motto, be the change, bring the change. In this regard, the team regularly take awareness sessions and organizes motivational talks, conscious seminar, and etc. with regard to various social issues prevalent in society, especially dealing with environment and women empowerment. With further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. It is my privilege to introduce our speaker of this evening, who is internationally acclaimed as a distinguished cyber lawyer and intellectual property expert, who is not only practicing law before Supreme Court of India, but also advises both Indian government and international organizations in developing new laws and amending extant laws of the Internet. She has graduated in Masters in Law from King's College, University of London. She has attained her doctorate in cyber law from NIU. She is also the part of international legal think tank that works for women and child development. She has been on expert panel of UNICEF working on online safety, actively associates with the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children and its think tank in India. Our speaker has also founded a philanthropic organization that is Foundation for Institution Reform and Education to promote cyber awareness, and particularly work for empowering women and children in India. She has been conferred with National Gaurav Award in 2017, Exemplary Contribution to Cyber Laws. She has also received the Law Day Award from Chief Justice of India for her book, Protection of Children on the Internet. With this, let us welcome the founder and chairperson of Lex Siberia, Dr. Karnika Seth. We welcome you, ma'am.
Very good afternoon to all. It's indeed a matter of great pleasure to be here at the Social Curate and to discuss such a pertinent topic. I know that it's something that everybody's concerned about when it comes to cyber safety or cyber security. Each of us is using digital media more than ever, especially during the COVID times. And it's my pleasure to talk about this today and how in terms of digital media do we envisage ourselves and India positions itself. Do we have a digital utopia at the moment, or how do we aim to proceed to reach that goal? It's something very interesting indeed when we talk about cyber law. For me, it's been a journey of more than 20 years now, and in the entire time span of 20 years, the law has evolved. We are trying to catch up with the new trends and technologies and the nuances and the challenges it gets along with the technical changes. There are new legal challenges which emanate every time. So we have been doing the same, and right from the time when the IT Act was initially enacted in 2000, things have really changed. At that point, data theft or other crimes like maybe sending or receiving some kind of a message which is maybe objectionable or explicit, something which is obscene, were the issues mainly, or other issues relating to cyber security. They became prominent later when in the 2008 and 9 the amendments have happened in the IT Act. The terrorism, more and more warfare, cyber warfare became a prominent issue, and we are now in a time and space where we are actually trying to see how most critical infrastructure or protected systems of the country could be at a stake, could be at risk. And then we have newer issues which are still to be addressed by the IT Act, like the fake news, how the social media can be made accountable, because each of us today are digital citizens. You will agree that we are creators of the IP, and we film videos, or we shoot our own say a song, or it could be anybody who's using internet, maybe journalism, putting your own comments there. But is this a safe place for all is a question which we have to address today. As a nation, we have not only looking at issues like data theft or defamation, but now over a period of time, especially during COVID, the education sector has had a huge transition and now uses this media more than ever. So what are the challenges even with children, with women? I know there have been clips in the media about even women teachers being harassed online. There has been discomfort with some children. They have been, attacked by sextortion and other rackets. So the problems definitely are of a different dimension and a different nature today than what they were 20 years ago. So giving you that perspective is important because we have come a long way, yet we have a long way to go as well. So it's something that we are in the midst of a maze. As a nation, we are doing a lot in terms of digital space. We are doing a lot. It's a digital mission, that our country is heading towards. Like we call it Atmanirbhar Bharat. We are trying to make technology here. We're trying to encourage, innovation and research. And not only that, we are trying to protect our borders. I was fortunate to work on a paper policy document with the MHA also, where we were talking about how to curb fake news in India. Then we did one paper with VIF, which the Honorable Home Minister at that point of time, I think that time it was released, and that was on armed forces, how armed forces need to use technology to protect our country. So a lot is being done in terms of that, plus trainings. We do a lot of the trainings today to law enforcement and to even children, and interactions with educational institutions, interactions with NGOs like yours. So that is with the aim to spread awareness and to empower each and every citizen of the country, because we are also interconnected today, that unless we safeguard ourselves and we try to safeguard others, this space will never come into a shape of manifestation of digital utopia as we are planning. So what we are dreaming of is a digital utopia, and that is possible if we have a more accountability, more transparency in terms of what platforms we are using, more security, more empowerment in terms of vigilance and care, how we can be careful when we are doing any kind of activities on the net, and also educating everybody of the do's and don'ts or the best practices for cyber safety. I know a lot of you would be probably coming from a school or college or other background, volunteers in terms of NGOs, or even software professionals, or otherwise, business people in business. The kind of segment that we are catering to, and when we are envisaging digital utopia, is not limited to one stakeholder. I'm talking about the whole ecosystem, and for every level, all these things are equally important. So it is something which was like a common rubric, common thread across all spectrum of people. And why just national? I would say international. US, UK, we have seen a lot of reforms during COVID time. They have tried to come out with specific acts and legislations to make digital space more robust and more user friendly and reliable. So that's something that we are all hoping that this will take us. A lot of women, a lot of children, businesses have actually thrived using internet. And I'm so glad to see the social media has been a huge impetus to growth in economy, in not just in India, but world over. It's connected people, and it's helped small businesses become more entrepreneurial and more self-sufficient. And this technology has really led a lot of a positive movement in terms of life and living and lifestyle and communication, entertainment. But coming with that, there have been some challenges. Like I addressed the crimes, the cyber crimes, rise in crimes. It's because a lot of anonymity is there on the internet, and it's easy for anybody to spoof or conceal your IP address. and they can use softwares and Tor or proxy servers or other means, to hide their real identity. They do it, that's known as onion routing. If you spoof ID, you have a layer after a layer after a layer, and you would not, somebody would want to check who's the originator, becomes difficult. And that is also a challenge with social media or other companies, because when they register, who is browsing, who is creating a fake account, they have to be on a constant vigil to delete fake accounts. And with the growing use of technology, new dimensions like facial technology today, we have had biometrics, we have digital signatures. While it strengthens encryption, on the other side there are problems like steganography, where you can actually conceal the real file. What is the file? If it's a music file, it'll appear as if it's a written document, and you can actually hide the real nature of content, or you can morph pictures. So there is always a flip side. When there is positive things happening on the internet, there is also a flip side. But we cannot. Today is the time and age where we cannot run away from technology, and one should not. It is a huge power in your hands, but provided we use it in the right way and safeguard ourselves too. So that is what I feel. So we need to basically use the best ways in which we can use technology, at the same time take our safeguards. That is having a good antivirus, having a good anti-spyware to check whether this is your systems are in order. And also when we talk about educating children, we tell them you cannot use abusive language. You're free to speak what you want to. There are consumer reviews online. There are also vocal issues on speaking, I would say posts or videos, audios, or even written text about somebody's product. But it cannot be defamatory. You cannot malign somebody's reputation, or you cannot use harsh words unless there is a strong ground and what you're saying is a fact. But even then, you have to be cautious of the language you use. So that is the whole story. I mean, it's like you have a freedom of speech in the country. You can speak your mind, whatever you want to speak, but there is also a reasonable restriction that the government can put. For example, if you remember, there was certain blocking of Assam riots. YouTube's certain videos were blocked. Now, all these videos, when they were blocked, that is because there was a genuine reason of national security, and riots should not happen. So even when mob lynching attacks happened in the past, those videos were shown. Something which is anti-religious is completely banned. So a lot of social media portals, through self-regulation and even otherwise, our India's law says that when it comes to some national security or public decency, morality, or something which will incite violence, government has the power to block that content. So that's important too for us to understand. And what will the social media company do? Supposingly there is a problem, for example, there is a morphed picture or a video which has been put up on a social media site. What do you do with that? Obviously, you need to report abuse. Once you report abuse, within 36 hours, that's the IT Act. It says that within 36 hours, they have to take that content down. If they don't, then the legal recourse is to go to the court of law or to ask the government agency, report it to them, and they need to remove it. And a lot of people don't know, but there is also a compensation which is possible under the IT Act. There is a compensation under Section 43. And you can claim that if supposingly any personal data has been stolen and misused by someone. Or you can even file a criminal case, of hacking. That's possible. And there are other remedies too. For example, I have handled many matters in the courts of law, whether it is Supreme Court or High Court. There are various issues in IT which come about. For example, we were doing a case where one man's, account was basically a bank account. There was a debit transaction. Multiple debits took place unauthorizedly, and this was reported to the bank. They did not reverse it. So as a result, it was found that the bank had not sent him the, on the registered email address and the phone, any OTP alerts. So any alerts, Insta alerts have to be sent by after the customer registers, and they were not sent. So obviously, when this happened, we filed a complaint before the adjudicating authority, who is secretary IT of every state, and he is empowered to give compensation to this, person who has suffered on that account, and the bank is accountable for it. So these are the kind of cases which we are doing, and then many cases, even the banking ombudsman, if you report this to your bank and they don't take action, you can report it to a banking ombudsman, and you don't need a lawyer for this. So there you just report it, and they will ensure that this, if it's happened with their negligence of the bank, then they will reverse this. But if it is your own negligence, that is what needs to be cautioned. A lot of people easily get duped by somebody who is had a social engineering attack, as we call it. They share their OTP even when they're using payment apps. They do a QR code scanning. It's a very common fraud happening. The other side, they say that you want to pay you, and they ask you to share your QR code. The moment you share your QR code, the money, instead of coming to your account, is debited from your account. So you have to be very cautious of how you are using a particular e-wallet, and you shouldn't be sharing any kind of OTPs or any kind of, items like anything which is personal sensitive with you. So that's very, very essential also for us to understand. Why I'm saying all this, because in today's times, more than anything, we are using payment apps, and we have to be cautious of our own safety. So that's very important. To create a digital ecosystem, or a utopia as we call it, these essential services, while we are using them, we have to maintain complete precautions of how we are actually using these services. Then it comes to putting pictures or videos. A lot of times, young children or otherwise, people experiment with some videos or photographs which they shouldn't be actually even clicking, but they do, and they save it. And they don't know, when the phone gets hacked by maybe clicking on any kind of link which comes on social media or otherwise, the photographs go as well. And many times we don't read the terms and conditions also. When we're using to maybe store pictures on a particular web service, we don't look at the terms and conditions. That's again a worry, because once we are using a service, we have to set the protocol. We have to say whether we would want to share this with other people or not. I once handled a case where a young student of a school, 16-year-old girl, she heard of some service, from someone, that you save your personal pictures on a particular web service. She actually tried to do that and deleted those pictures from her phone. The next morning, she realized that all these personal pictures were on her social media. She forgot to put or rather she didn't bother actually putting the terms and conditions, and she didn't look at those, and nor did she set the protocol to only private viewing mode. Now that's something which we really need to explain to our young generation, or even otherwise, that whatever services we are using, we have to be cautious of what we are doing on that platform. Now, a lot of times, I've also seen, had cases where, say, public figure is being defamed online, or anybody, in fact, could be defamed online. So in those cases, we usually go to the court of law and we ask for an injunction order from the court. And when we show the merits of the case, that so-and-so has a particular reputation, and there are no bases or facts which allege, there is no veracity in what is being said, no truth is being said, or by use of these words or derogatory information on the net, then the court examines that. And if that case is true, then if the information is false and the person is being actually defamed, that court issues a notice and basically injunction order for blocking that particular video or particular post. So that is also possible. Now, I understand a lot of times, especially women would go to, the National Commission for Women or Delhi Commission for Women, That's one of the bodies which looks after, and helps women with such cases. However, a lot of people also don't know that there is free legal aid available in many, in fact, every court. So you can actually, if somebody has been a victim of the crime and cannot afford a particular service or legal service, even free legal aid is given by the government. So that's something which is also important to highlight here. Now, I think with this spectrum of issues which are emerging today, a lot needs to be looked into in terms of security. When we say security, not at the personal level alone, but if you're working as a corporate, you may be working from home at the moment. At this point, what security systems are being adopted? What policies you have to abide by? For example, every company has its own policy, work from home policy also. We also helped companies make these policies during WFH time. And many cases when we have handled data thefts cases, the common error or the common mistake which employees have made is that they have transferred from their official ID any kind of company related data to their personal ID. And that's something which most company policies will not allow, but is sometimes just done as a practice. And later on, if the person leaves the organization, the same organization pulls up those emails and says this is something which is against the policy, and therefore you're charged of data theft. So in order to avoid this kind of a scenario, if you're an employee, you have to be cautious of abiding by the policies. And if you're an employer, you have to be cautious of what you're allowing and what you don't allow, and also monitoring the same. So a lot of good softwares are available to monitor data loss prevention softwares, which employers use to actually see what is happening. And often they use VPNs also for cybersecurity purposes. So the experience that in terms of experience, there are different kinds of issues when it comes to employer or employee, and we've handled both sides of the story, so both kinds of cases. And my message to you all on this will be that whatever are the terms and conditions, whether they are on the website or of their organization you work for, you have to be vigilant and not be callous or not be careless. At this point, it's very important to abide by them. So given this spectrum, I see a lot happening with the new PDP bill, which is coming now soon in India. So a lot of our personal data, a lot of our maybe even non-personal data, we are also thinking of a bill. So I work with, I've worked on a lot of issues concerning personal data. And I feel that both government and private entities will now become equally accountable and equally responsible for handling people's data. Why you're collecting data? A lot of times, even yesterday I was downloading an app, a food app, and it says it needs access to my, say, pictures or videos. Why does it have to? We don't stop and think. We just say, okay, I agree, and just set it as I agree, and we want to just start using the app without realizing what all access have we given. So that's something which we need to understand. And even with the Aadhaar judgment of the Supreme Court, it has been very, very clearly said that it is our fundamental right, the right to privacy. Yet I find so many apps and websites at the time of registration want to verify using Aadhaar. They are not supposed to ask for this, but they are asking, and people are giving. So that is what we need to be very cautious of. In the Justice case, Puttaswamy case, it has been very, very clearly said that nobody can ask for it. Only if somebody wants subsidies of the government, want to avail that, voluntarily can give his Aadhaar, but not otherwise. So that's something which we have to be cautious about. And at this point, with the new PDP bill, every company who's taking your data will have to give you a clear picture of why they're taking data, how much time will they be keeping it, for what purpose, is it going to be transferred to a server abroad, then that will also require the data protection authority's permission as well as your consent. Only with that it can go out. So that and the penalties are very high. 4% of the global turnover of the company, it can be up to 15 crores that the companies can be fined for taking people's data without their consent. So that's how strict the law will be that is being envisaged. And we are hoping that there will be more things addressed there, because there are some lacunas also currently in that bill. And if they're properly addressed, then it can be a good, I would say, blueprint or an instrument for India. And apart from that, there are going to be, the new cyber security policy. We're waiting for this new cyber security policy. And I was fortunate to be a part of one of the consultations, where we talked about how we need to even empower, I would say, every digital citizen in the country, because cybersecurity and digital safety right from school level is very important, and it should be part of the fabric of the cybersecurity policy of the country. It's very important to have that. If we can do this, then we can safeguard a lot of other issues which later on create problems at a large scale. Something like fake news needs to be addressed there, and maybe have a new legislation of the whole thing. And then there have been some new issues like ransomware attacks and man-in-the-middle attacks. They still pose a challenge to technical companies who are working on investigations, also investigators also. So there are a number of issues which have cropped up in the last few years, and we are all actually heading towards how we can safeguard, create more foolproof technology as well as law which goes hand in hand and actually is able to combat the issues and challenges which we are faced with at this point. Because to go to a further regime where we create a digital utopia, we will have to empower everybody, and we will have to have the right technology, affordable technology for everybody. I'm not just talking about urban India right now. I'm talking about the huge rural population, which we are also, is part of India. And when we talk about the rural population, though people have mobile phones, the people might have a cyber cafe or some basic technology, but not everybody is still connected on the internet. And that's what we have to be mindful of, and create easy, user-friendly technology which is affordable, and something which we are able to impart training also, because only giving the gadget or the technology or infrastructure in place is also not enough. So you have to have the trained manpower force. Therefore, in the Digital India Mission, we have talked about new professionals, more than maybe 5 million professionals we need for even forensics and cybersecurity. So I think we have a huge potential in terms of tech and power, because in India, manpower is a huge asset. If we can train our manforce and manpower, and apart from India being a social, like I would say, software hub, development hub, it can be even in terms of hardware, important place for manufacturers from abroad coming and setting up factories in India. And rather, I would say, we create our own Make in India, as we do. We are planning to do this, and we are doing this. So we are empowering ourselves in terms of every sphere of tech today, because everything is tech connected, whether it is law, whether it is our services. Even if we have to order food or we have to order groceries today, we are doing it online. It's become a lifeline. It's become like a helpline for everybody. So whatever you are doing, whether it's communication or it's expressing yourselves, work, business, communication, it's become just like your home address, like I would say your email address and your phone number has become so important, like your social security number, in the UK, or your Aadhaar is so important. Tech is so important. Every gadget that you hold has so much of your information. So and what you can make, what use you can make of it. So we have to think of those bigger dimensions on how we can contribute to cyber safety and creating a digital utopia. Each of us can contribute in a meaningful way and work on this vision. Work on this vision to create a digital utopia while all stakeholders join hands, lawmakers, policymakers, technology makers, people who are making hardware, people who are using these facilities, and bringing their businesses and their lifestyles to a different scale and different level. I think we can also empower the not so fortunate people, impart them digital literacy through online means, like we are doing with school kids today. Let this message go to even rural India. Let this technology help them grow, because with one system we can train the entire village. It is possible, provided we give them or these gadgets. I was also going through some newspaper clips where it was talked about certain secondary school children are being taught through mobile phones and some apps. That's a huge asset. And the government, UGC, I would say IGNU, they've created some very good portals on education for such, I would say the huge population of urban and rural children who can actually benefit from there. A lot of good free, I would say, educational tools and apps are being circulated. And we can grow from strength to strength in this dimension and area. So there's a lot to be done in terms of digital utopia, and a lot of policies need to be aligned. Social media needs to work on its own self-regulation. Should we have a government and social media, contributed or represented independent body to regulate social media is another question we are addressing at this point, apart from your fake news and other issues. So it's a huge challenge because we are not just catering to one country, but what we do here will also have repercussions in our other interactions with foreign countries and what we are doing in terms of business or in terms of personal security. So therefore, it has to be a well thought out documentation work and well thought out policy paper or a think tank which needs to work on this. And I'm glad that we have taken some measures in this regard and hope that things will streamline and we see this vision being materialized very soon. Now, I think with this background, do you think we can take some interactive questions if your audience would like to do that? Since we are almost 40 minutes now. I'm not sure if there are any questions, but I will quickly look. Okay, so somebody is talking about deep fakes. Yes, a lot of times we come across, some videos and other, I would say, new emerging issues like memes and other issues today. And it's very difficult to find whether this is actually, a real video or a real picture or not. You can use fact checkers. You can use, there are technical tools to also and websites to also find out if this is a authentic one or not. A lot of times people have used back machine, Google Images and other interesting tools available online to see if this was a real content or is it something which is superimposed or morphed. A lot of times this may not be the real thing. The text may have changed, the image may have changed. And during one of the webinars I was speaking, delivering an address for I think FICCI or NASSCOM. At that point we dealt with this and we showed the video where how you can through YouTube, there was a video which you can actually use to see if this is a fake video or a genuine video. So you are actually able to do it through various free tools available online.
Very rightly. Ma'am, I have a question. Can you please elaborate on PDP bill?
Yes, I think PDP bill, as I was explaining, will empower everybody in terms of what data they are giving. what data can be collected from them without their consent, explicit consent. It's not possible, because a lot of times you will see when you want to take on, go to a website, you want to avail its services, you will see there in very fine print some rights that you're giving away without understanding what you're giving away. So those terms and conditions, every company will have to give very clearly and expressly in bold letters, that what they are taking from you and why they are taking from you. And only with your consent then that is possible. Otherwise you can decline it. Tomorrow if you want to change or update any information in their records, you can also do that. If you want to say that you don't want this data, on their server, you can actually say that. You have given a consent, later on you can withdraw that. So a lot of times companies don't disclose who they will share this data with. They are supposed to mandatorily tell you what purpose this data will be used for how long, and they cannot take more than what is necessary and keep it for as more time than what is necessary. So all these are become very tight protocols, very tight I would say rules which will protect people. The challenge is to see the implementation. There is a data protection authority which India has, this this bill will probably envisage, and right now once it's enacted will bring into being, and that body will oversee every enforcement of this CDP law. And not only that, the bone of contention right now is who will be represented, who all stakeholders. Should it be more government stakeholders or social media participants or experts on that panel? I think we need to be very fair and balanced in that approach, because every side, every stakeholder needs to have a voice, which is the main concerned stakeholder in this regard. And there is also a bone of contention about the mirror copy, the image copy. RBI, RBI had given a mandate that no payment data, payment related data can go out of India without a person's consent. But now they have slightly changed that in the new bill, which is being debated, wherein the data can go out and stay in the server with the consent of the person who is concerned, and after approval of the data protection authority. Earlier that was not permissible, and now the new bill envisages only a mirror copy of that will be remaining in India, and the rest main data can go abroad. Now that's something which is still being debated, and I think we need to look at it with a closer lens. Also, there is a fact that sensitive data like health record, sensitive data like anybody's personal bank information, now those things are sensitive. Religious views of people, political views. Social media is very often used for polarization, preference to a particular political party, or writing about a particular party by anybody, in fact, or even social like election campaigns. So free and fair, I would say, use of platform is what is being advocated, and I think that's the right approach. According to me, it's very important to have a free and fair, neutral, body or a platform which can, point to a particular, say, election campaign is happening, and should be fairly, put out. It should be obviously also curtailing or removing any kind of fake accounts or fake propagandas or fake, election campaigns. Need to be very carefully looked into. So all these efforts are now going to be put, with whatever legislation will come. We're also working on social media, regulation. What will happen? Ultimately, how accountable can we make them? Because they have to appoint a public grievance officer. In every platform needs to do that, because if there is a report abuse, or if there is a particular need, then where should one write to? If you write to them and their people are based out of India, it becomes very difficult to get justice. So these are the things which I think every person is kind of right now thinking about. And I think if really needs a lot of closer introspection before finally something can be worked out in terms of policy. Yes.
Rightly said, ma'am. Ma'am, you talked about social media. With this social media, I want to add on a question asked by Mr. Kumar. He's asking what we can't have a model code to direct these social media. What should be their particular provision? Can we have a model code to direct them, like be it
Well,
YouTube, Instagram?
yes, like our IT Act is based on UNCITRAL model law, you know. When we talk about, as an analogy, social media law, there should be something to regulate social media. While most social media giants will say that it's not possible because they have millions of pages, they can't see and, you know, check every content. But, you know, with regards to child pornography, even Supreme Court has said that in terms of child pornography, there is no zero tolerance policy. So whatever content is there needs to be removed immediately. And we see a lot of, I would say, self-regulation, directions to given to the social media to curtail even uploading of such content. So they are asked to filter out, pre-filter content. Now that kind of a due diligence guideline is kind of missing in India in terms of other kinds of crimes. Though they have their own policy on their websites, which says don't put hate speech, don't put defamatory material, or don't harass someone using our platform. But how many people really read this, and you know, they will probably misuse it. And if they do misuse it, then there has to be some redressal and fast redressal to the same. So this is what is being debated. What are the due diligence guidelines? And if there is a crime which happens, then how quickly can we get a redressal through social media? So I think there has to be some either a law framed out of the same, or a guideline given, a proper guideline which addresses both these issues, which is kind of missing at this point.
Ma'am, with this,
Yeah.
one more question by Shans. She's asking to elaborate on the QR code as authentic apps like GPay. They're also asking for the QR code. So
Yes.
what can we do about it? And can you please pay more attention to the QR code? Can you elaborate on this topic?
In the one of the cases, we have actually advised on a few cases last 6 months. There have been so many of them. In one of the cases, there was a doctor who had put up a post on an auction site, wanted to give away the dental chair and sell it. Now, somebody posing as an army officer contacted the doctor and said, "Okay, I want to purchase this particular dental chair, and you share with me this particular QR code on the payment app that the doctor was using." And when that happened, she shared her QR code. The moment that happened, there was a message which reflected on her phone saying that you pay 25,000 rupees. And she thought she was being paid. So she said, "Okay, I agree." And the moment she did that, clicked on OK, the money got debited from her account. So a lot of times, people share the QR code without realizing the money is being debited or not debited. There was some ambiguity also on the platform because it didn't say whether it's been credited or debited. Later on, I discussed the same thing in one of the webinars with a representative, senior officer from the National Payment Council of India. And there, he basically clarified that now they have introduced some new features where it has become mandatory for the platform to say whether the money is getting debited or credited. So most platforms should now adopt that strategy rather than having an ambiguous screen which people not able to follow and just becoming a victim of these crimes. So this is why you need to be very careful of not sharing QR code easily like this with somebody or OTPs with anyone. That's very important.
Ma'am, forwarding to this, I have one more question. How government can make this utopia more better? What government can do in this regard?
Government is doing basically if you see the Digital India mission, the whole vision is to make India a cyber power and very, I would say, empowered in terms of nation. Like I was saying, not only in terms of hardware, software, professionals, education, in I would say enabling the security mechanisms. But I think India needs to also think of, letting the rural population also understand the, and connect them to this internet, empower the villagers, empower the rural workforce, train them, bring digital literacy, because with education only things will look better. And apart from that, it's also important to make our entrepreneurial initiatives in the urban populace also equally effective through the use of technology. There is a lot being done in terms of Make in India also. So the focus is on making ourselves self-reliant and making ourselves empowered in terms of what we can do with this platform. Surely knowledge and education can spread far and wide. I have also witnessed this change, and I think 10 years ago I had this vision in my mind, and I was one of the inaugural functions at the Cyber Appellate Tribunal. I had gone and I saw first screen, which was a video screen there, and at that time the chairperson said that he would be using that to do talk to people from different quarters of India. And that was an amazing thing to happen 10 years ago. But now with this, everybody is now interconnected. We have empowered ourselves through the technology, and what we are doing today also on Social Cure here with Spire, our NGO, is something that one could not have imagined maybe a few years ago, but now it is everybody's reality. And so what was a digital utopia 10 years ago is now today's reality. And so what we are envisioning today will be tomorrow's reality, right? So it's something that we are working on consistently. But I agree, there's a lot India needs to do in terms of policy and legal framework. Because while technology is like, it's like you're given the gadget to a person to use without the know-how, how is he supposed to use it, or not just functionally, but his own security wise also. And with the IP assets which are being created on it, how can he safeguard that IP asset? That's very important. If we don't do that, then we don't progress in the right direction. And if we don't stop the problem from becoming a menace right now, then problems like fake news, problems like cyber terrorism, problems like cyber stalking, trolling, revenge porn can be a huge dimension and create havoc in society, especially when it comes to hurting people's religious feelings, political views. It can be a hindrance to having a proper democracy in the country. It can influence people in the wrong ways. It can mislead people. It can also play havoc with children's health, mental health, and well-being. Problems like blue whale, problems like initially you've seen a lot happening in terms of cyberbullying. The children are on social media even when they're 13 or younger, and they don't know what's happening and what are the threats. So that is the reason I set up this NGO also, Fire, because we were spreading cybersecurity awareness to law enforcement people. And I realized that our own children who are growing, they're learning Java or they're learning coding today, and they're talking about ethical data and other issues. I mean, have they got any know-how to safeguard themselves because they are using technology more than us? They don't. And that is the reason, we set this up, and we have been doing these trainings like 14 states or more, working with government bodies to make new policies to help, look at this situation as well. And in interactions with children, educators, teachers, it has been very effective because this whole awareness is risen now. Everybody is becoming aware of what are the do's and don'ts. At least they can safeguard themselves. So that's how I see with Digital Utopia. In order to achieve that dream, we need to really work on it now. So the roadmap has to be made now.
Rightly said, ma'am. Ma'am, we have next question by Mr. Mehul Bansal. Mehul is asking, ma'am, how is it possible to ban sites completely when everything can be opened with VPN?
I can't hear you. Can you repeat your question, please?
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes.
Ma'am, Mehul is asking how can we ban anything because everything is available through VPNs. How can we ban sites because they are available through VPNs? Mr. Mehul is asking the same.
I know internet, we cannot actually wipe out content, specifically if you're talking about some things which are harmful to minors, then something like that needs to have some software tools deployed, or on your Wi-Fi you can have a protection mechanism. Like you have a Netflix account or you have another account, you can have a child account for Google. Similarly, there are software tools which are available to curtail and filter out the content you want the kids to see. Now, as regards adults, this has been a very debated topic in US, in India as well. When it comes to people above 18 years, they have the right to access internet and do whatever they would like to do in terms of surfing the net, and there is no embargo, right? Because there is freedom of speech and expression. Now now the question here is, India actually bans, rather makes it an offense that if somebody is publishing any sexually explicit content or publishing any content which is maybe like an MMS or a video or a picture or sending any messages, that is actually a crime. But how many times you're able to actually enforce the law is a question, because one site you will take down and tomorrow the same content floats on the other side. So, and especially in IP matters, intellectual property matters, the courts have started giving injunction orders where they ban a particular content altogether from the net, like a blanket injunction. It is possible, if the same content is duplicated elsewhere, the same will be also taken down once brought to notice of the particular website. So this is possible, and we are trying to find solutions in law. So earlier this was not possible, but now with dynamic injunctions happening, this is now becoming possible. So a lot of movies which are get pirated or otherwise, you can actually block that content out also. So that's how things are. But yes, using spoofing tools, even if you have a Tor, even if you have been asked not to particular look at particular sites, or if you are technically been kept out of it, you are still able to bypass it, and a lot of times it happens. This the nature of the internet is such. That is the task for even law enforcement and other investigators.
All right, ma'am. Ma'am, last but not the least, we have next question of Mrs. Trehan. She's asking about how dark web can impact us on large scale. What is the
Yes.
effect of dark web on large scale?
Dark web is a huge challenge, no doubt, because time and again we see a lot of illegal activity, whether it's drug peddling or if it's selling any kind of arms, any kind of illegal goods, uh, things which are completely illegal, and they are happening online, and it's very difficult to find out who the person is, because the tracing back is footprint is very difficult. So that is definitely a challenge, and we still need a proper technical and robust law also, in terms of dealing with these issues on the dark web maybe. And a lot of crimes happen with that only, and it's very difficult to actually break that anonymous chain, the onion routing chain. It's very difficult to even have that, and a lot of money laundering activities are happening there, things which are not possible otherwise. You will find them happening on the dark web. Child pornography being sold, a lot is happening. And I think with honeypots and other means, a lot of investigators are trying to see how best we can you know uh, basically target and break the chain of these rackets at a huge pace. At this point, there are definitely increasing dimensions of this problem. Things which are against national security, national interest, these are happening. Cyber terrorist activities. A lot needs to be looked into in this sphere. I think law needs to catch up with technology. So it's technology is running like a horse. So we have to really chase it, because we really need to be a step ahead. But it's quite a task for all legislators or even law enforcement people. I would say not only that, but also the social media or other companies themselves, because they probably didn't envisage these kind of issues would emerge, but the repercussions and I would say the magnitude has really enlarged in the last few years. we have been imparting trainings to law enforcement and also working on policy issues and think tanks. But now is the, I would say, critical phase of important decisions on protecting data, important decisions on taking down on content, because we can't do too much of it. If we do too much, there will be censorship. But not, I feel that that cannot be labeled as censorship at the cost of saving people's interest and basically combating which is illegal. So that has to be a fine balance in the two. That's what we are faced with.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Our words are not capable to give a gratification to you. Thank you for enlightening us. With this, I request the chairman of Social Cure, Mr. Pulkit Joshi, to please give vote of thanks to Madam Seth.
Thank you, Nisha. So, good evening to one and all. On this wonderful evening today, I would like to present the vote of thanks to all our attendees for the webinar. I would further like to take the opportunity to thank our guest speaker for today, Dr. Karnika Seth, for this wonderful webinar today. There could not have been more appropriate person than ma'am to embellish, to enhance, to enlighten, and to enrich the event. Thank you very much, ma'am. Means a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Special and heartfelt thanks to all the volunteers of Team Social Cure and Team Fire NGO for glorifying this session. Once again, my sincere thanks to and all. Be safe, be aware.